Cool. So, hi everyone. I am Akshat Saxena here for a session on responses, rebuttals, and POIs. Um, अरे यार मैं फर्स्ट लाइन हमेशा भूल जाता हूँ मैं क्या कहना चाह रहा था रुको एक सेकेंड हाँ so this is again a recreation of a previous session that our seniors took. So 2 years ago when I was when Soumya and we all were freshers. Uh, So Aditya Sareen, who is 2 years senior to us, he took that session for us. So this is just a recreation of the same session. Uh, but like again, as I said, it's important for you to be here and live तुम्हारे अलग doubts होंगे जो उस टाइम के बच्चों के doubts थे वो अलग थे. We'll also interact a lot during this session. So I'll give you a motion, I'll give you a gov case, and after telling you all how to rebut stuff in general, you also get to rebut arguments like actual arguments and in the chat and or verbally जैसे भी चाहो देखेंगे. Uh, so it's going to be an interactive session also. So the rebuttals that you bring would also be different from what the rebuttals 2 years ago people brought, which is what basically Soumya and Sahaj were saying pehle ki these sessions are very dynamic. Everyone has different doubts, everyone has different responses and things like that. So it's important to be here live and good to see that we have a lot of people. Cool. Sorry for the delay. पहली बात तो sorry for the half an hour postponement. Something came up on my end. Uh, एकदम last minute पे, which is why we had to postpone. Um, and again, sorry for the 4:30 के बाद वाला delay also. Because of that, I wasn't able to like completely form the PPT. So, which is why this is uh, extra sleep. चलो बढ़िया है भाई. Uh, which is why this is like a not this is not gonna be a very long session. I've not planned it itna zyada, but this generally doesn't need to be planned itna zyada also. It's more of an interactive session. Cool. Let's start. The golden rules for rebuttal. So these are the three things that you need to keep in mind. The first is learn how to listen in a debate. So a couple of sessions back, some of you were asking whether you can talk to your teammates during the debate and all, or is it not allowed and things like that, है ना? And my response was that as long as it doesn't disturb the other people or like the other team and the judges, it's fine. You are allowed to talk. But what I saved for later is how much should you talk, right? Because it's not that all the time that you have in a debate you're open to talking to your teammates and things like that, because for most of it the like either it's one of your teammates that's speaking or it is one of the other team's teammates that's speaking. What happens is, and especially चलो अपनी speech के time it's fine that you're probably talking to your बचा हुआ teammate, like probably suppose you are in gov team, your prime minister is giving their speech. You as DPM and your gov whip can possibly talk in that, given that PM what the PM is saying is essentially what you have discussed. So ठीक है, in that case you can talk, although उसमें भी ज़्यादा नहीं, because there are also sometimes things that speakers will say that you haven't discussed, because it's not realistically possible that uh, okay, for PM it's possible, but for future speeches, suppose LO said something and DPM has to revert to all those things. It's not realistically possible that you'll always be able to rebut, like always be able to discuss what you want to say as rebuttal to the LO, right? So some things you'll discuss in the middle of the LO speech with your teammates, but some things the DPM might individually decide that अच्छा हाँ ये बोलूँगा मैं LO के against, and might not get the time to discuss with you all. So it's important to somewhat pay attention to your own team ka speaker also, because you are, if you're someone who needs to give the speech later, you're the one who has to defend that material that came in your team ka previous speech. But what this first rule caters to more is when the other team's speeches are going on, because that's completely new material for you, right? That's the more important part here. When we say learn how to listen in a debate, and in a rebuttals ki workshop wala context, what we're talking about is how to listen in a debate to the other team. How much should you talk during that time, right? Firstly, let's think about how to listen to the debate. So like there is like a speech consists of 7 minutes ka content, right? There is like in the previous workshop we already understood what the structure of an argument is. There's an idea, there's analysis to that idea, and there's evidence to support those ideas and analysis, right? All of these things have relative importance to each other. Not everything that a speaker says is important. The idea, as we discussed, is the most important thing. If you rebut that idea, you have the most chances of winning the debate, assuming your rebuttal was good, which we learn how it can be in this workshop. Um, Analysis rebuttal is also fine. That's what usually happens. Uh, but evidence वगैरह इतना नहीं करना. Or if it's a relatively, if it's like there's different points in analysis and you waste time in listening to all of that, or like not listening, listen to karna hai, but like rebutting to all of that, it becomes time consuming. So best is to figure out what the most important parts in a speech are and rebut them such that the other things fall automatically, right? That should be your idea. Minimal fuss, maximum damage. If you've read the Monash guide, you might have seen this phrase there, right? That's what it means. So what we mean is that what you need to do is locate the most important parts of people's speeches, and the most important parts are obviously their ideas or their premises. So like a premise of an argument or an assumption of an argument is a situation or any claim on which further claims of that argument are based. If you or like, and there are reasons to support that premise and things like that, there are reasons to support that argument. Those reasons might be n in number, but instead of like focusing on those reasons too much, what you can do is break the premise directly so that even if the reasons are proven, they become irrelevant, right? So listen to the debate, figure out what the most important parts of a speech are, and try to rebut them primarily, then go on to other less important parts if you have the time. Because it's not that you'll use all of the time in rebuttals, you also have your own case, right? For the majority of the speech, you have to push your own case, defend your own case, weigh your case against the other side's case, and things like that. So that's first on how to listen in a debate. Focus on the important things. Listening to sabhi kuch karna hai, but the more art in this is to figure out what the important parts are, and that you'll gain with experience, right? Overnight nahi ho jayega, it will take some time. The second thing here is make notes of what you hear. एक सेकंड रुकना. क्या हुआ? हाँ ले 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 ले, जल्दी लेना बस. Just wait a second. Okay. हाँ जी. So make notes of what you hear. So obviously in a debate, no matter whether you're a debater or a judge, you will get sheets of paper by the organizing committee. You can also carry your own notebook or papers or things like that. That's irrelevant, but what is relevant is that you will make notes in a debate no matter what you're doing, right? How do you make notes of what you hear? So in debating, people say a lot of things, right? And what like the unique thing in debating is that, for better or worse, I don't know, uh, in most cases for the better, you get a lot of words. You get accustomed to the skill of talking about simple things or even complex things for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and things like that. So there will be a lot of words in the other person's speeches. Debaters also sometimes speak very fast, as you might have noticed in the video that we sent you of the recorded debate. Henna, some of you might feel that in conversations we don't speak that fast, but you'll get the hang of it somewhat. Uh, but even in a normal speed also, in 7 minutes there's a lot of content. You don't need to note down each and everything, right? Or even if you want to, there are shorter ways of noting down the same thing. If you go on noting down word for word everything that the other speaker says, what will happen is, firstly, you will run out of sheets very quickly, but secondly, you'll be so much engrossed in noting down word for word everything that you'll not be able to critically think about what the other person is saying, because all your mental power is being spent in remembering, अच्छा इसने अभी 5 सेकंड पहले क्या बोला था and मैं इसको note करूँ and things like that, right? So that's not the primary thing. What you need to do is critically think about what the other side is saying, condense their ideas into shorter words or keywords, or I'm not saying कि पूरी speech 8-10 शब्दों में निपटा दो, ऐसी बात नहीं है। एक speech में some people use half a sheet, some people who even use one sheet for one speech or things like that, depend करता है, depends on your handwriting, depends on how much you can understand with what quantity of words, or what your noting style is. You will also develop your style as in like as much like जितना आप debate करोगे उस हिसाब से. But what I mean is you don't need to note down everything that the other speaker says. Condense it to a shorter form, as short as possible, so that you're still able to understand what they're saying, and you look at those words and you remember, acha, haan, this is what that argument was, and then you're able to think of rebuttals of that idea. So make notes of what you hear, keep them as short as possible, and things like that. The third golden rule is do not overtalk to your teammates. This is what I was talking about in the starting. They also need to listen to the debate, right? Because sure, you have the permission to talk to your teammates, but what you need to do is have an optimum amount of communication with your teammate, not too less to the point that you people are not on the same page about things, and you were thinking that हमको ये बोलना चाहिए, and the other person goes ahead and says something else which backfires, or vice versa, आपने कुछ उल्टा बोल दिया, and things like that. So less communication is harmful. But what does more communication do? More communication means that you have a good amount of coordination among yourselves, but the trade-off here is that you will not be able to properly listen to the other side's speech, right? Because you're busy listening to one person, you're busy listening to your teammates. So there is it's this is also an art or a skill that you'll learn with time, as to, because like I said, you'll understand with time what are the important things that the other speaker is speaking. So if you think that what the other speaker is speaking is important, probably shouldn't talk during that time, so that everyone can pay attention to that. If the other speaker is giving examples or things like that, or like just in general not saying as relevant stuff, possibly that's a better time to talk to your teammates and things like that. Over talking with the problem happens that you will definitely miss out on some important thing that the other person said, and therefore you'll not be able to firstly remember that अच्छा उसके केस में ये भी आर्ग्यूमेंट थी इंपॉर्टेंट जो मुझे तोड़नी थी. Secondly, you will feel that हाँ हमने तो कुछ गलत नहीं किया है, but at the end of the debate the judge will come ahead and say that this other team said this thing, you did not respond to that or things like that, and you will lose the debate, and you will feel resentful to the judge that अरे ये चीज़ तो बोली नहीं थी, या फिर ये तो unfair verdict दिया है and things like that. But the reality in most cases would be that it was you who did not pay attention to the speaker, the due attention that that speech deserved, and therefore lost the debate. So it's always advised to not overtalk to your teammates. There's also an element of trust here, right? You need to remember that if we have formed a team, or if you have formed a team, no matter what, there is a certain level of trust that you need to have with your teammates. So अगर आपके मन में 7 rebuttals आ रहे हैं, you don't need to tell each and every 7 of those rebuttals to the ongoing speaker जो अभी तुम्हारी टीम से जाने वाला है कि ये बोल देना, ये बोल देना, ये बोल देना, to the point that it fucks up their mental space and they are not able to focus on the debate, because you can't be that overbearing. If it's a very important rebuttal that you think the other person definitely cannot miss or things like that, then it's fair, that amount of talking is affordable for you, right? But do not over talk to your teammates. Trust them that they also can rebut things, and like even if you want to tell them, find favorable times to tell them, and don't like uh, be overbearing towards them to the point that they're not able to structure their own speech and तुम को ही सुन रहे हैं and सब कुछ mix and match हो रहा है, खिचड़ी बन रही है, ठीक है? So that should not happen. These are the golden rules which are important for rebuttals. Remember them throughout your debating career. Cool, let's move on to the next slide. What is the use of rebuttals? Very short. Like we talked about in the first session, it's not just arguments in a debate, it's rebuttals to those arguments, it's rebuttals to the other side's rebuttals. So you can do two things. You can rebut the other side's arguments. You can do so by possibly pointing out gaps in the logic. Suppose they are saying that A leads to B, but they don't tell you why A leads to B. You can point out that gap in logic and tell that it's an assertion and things like that. or possibly fill in that gap by an opposing logic that we think that because of this logic that we're giving you, A doesn't lead to B or A leads to C or something like that. That we can rebut the other team's arguments, right? The other thing that you can do with rebuttals is defend your own arguments by defending their rebuttals. Because realistically, in any debate, you will not fare in a debate without any attacks to your arguments. There will be attacks to your argument by the other side also. You the your view of debating cannot be that हाँ मैं argument बनाऊंगा and मैं उनके argument को rebut करूंगा and मैं जीत जाऊंगा या जीत जाऊंगी or whatever. I'm sorry, I can't think of a gender neutral way of saying this in Hindi. Probably that's a problem with the language. But yeah, जो भी है. So your view can't be as simplistic as this. You need to have a holistic view of the debate. There will be ways in which the other side provides weighing as to why their arguments are more important than your arguments and things like that. You need to rebut that weighing by providing a counter weighing. कि नहीं, we think that this is more important than that because of XYZ reason, or the metric by which they are saying that हमारा चीज ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है is a wrong metric and because of ABC reason or things like that. You need to defend your arguments against their rebuttals. They will rebut your argument. You need to give rebuttals to that rebuttal to tell why that rebuttal does not stand. Otherwise, what will mostly happen is even if the rebuttal was shit, because you did not respond to that, it sounded persuasive to the judge. You did, and like the exchange stopped there. You made an argument, the other team made a rebuttal, there was no response to that rebuttal. If that rebuttal was shit but it sounded well, the judge is more likely to give that to the other team because अरे इसके बाद तो तुमने कुछ बोला ही नहीं, so this is the last word and things like that. So you also need to defend your own arguments. So that's also another use of rebuttals. Cool. Let's move on to the next slide. How to rebut arguments. So these are just few tips that you can keep in mind while rebutting arguments and basically what makes good rebuttals. Firstly, how learn how to listen in a debate. This is the most important thing. As I already told you, you need to pay attention to the other speakers. You can't take them for granted because you know what, a lot of the times what happens is that you have done case prep on a particular side of the motion for 25 minutes या 15 minutes in case of BPs for example. What happens is that you become, at least for a short period of time, so passionate about your arguments that you feel that हाँ मैं तो सही ही बोल रहा हूँ, that I'm always like I'm saying the right thing, I'm all logical all the time. And so what happens is subconsciously you think of the other case as being inferior to your case by default, or the other side of the motion to be inferior by default. कि हाँ, the arguments that I have thought are logical, I will pay more time to them or I'll only think about them. Or like what the effect of this is that you don't pay as much attention to the opposing case as it deserves. यू थिंक दैट हाँ ठीक है, इसका तो मैं एक आध मिनट रिबटल करके या वन लाइनर रिस्पॉन्स करके कर दूंगा, सुपरफिशियली एंगेज कर लूंगा दूसरी साइड से एंड खत्म हो जाएगी बात. बट इट्स नॉट ट्रू. द अदर साइड इज ऑल्सो ब्रिंगिंग सम सब्सटेंस. सो you need to pay attention as much as the other side ka case deserves, and you need to rebut those pieces of content accordingly. So make sure that you don't automatically pay less attention to the other side, right? Pay them the due attention that it deserves. Also strategically pay that attention, focus on the important things more and things like that. The second thing, locate and identify the important arguments. Like I said, the premise of an argument, the premise is basically the fact or the assumption that an argument is based on. Not fact, but like assumption. If you break that assumption or those set of assumptions, the argument in itself is more likely to fall. So locate important arguments, or like just in general, even if there are multiple arguments, think which is the argument that is most damaging to your case. Rebut that सबसे पहले. Rebut the strongest parts of the opposing side's case, because that's where you're likely to lose the most. So deal with that first. The third thing is, before you rebut something, tell what you are rebutting in a couple of lines. Tell the other side's argument. So if the other side has made three arguments, ठीक है, you say argument one. Suppose it's something about and something about more employment, for example, ऐसे example ले लो. The other side says that this policy will create more employment because of ABC reason, and like this will just take you one line or two line, but it's important to tell the judge what exactly are you rebutting to, because the other side has said a lot of things in their speeches, right? So you need to firstly in short tell them ki which part of this speech exactly am I rebutting in one or two lines, and then start with your rebuttal. So you, for what happens is sometimes what the other speakers do is either they don't tell what they are rebutting and बस अपना rebuttal बोल देते हैं. Sometimes the judge gets confused that अरे तुम एग्जैक्टली किस चीज को रिवर्ट कर रहे हो, मेरे को थोड़ा समझ नहीं आ रहा. और द उल्टा विच इज दैट while telling what exactly they are rebutting, they waste a lot of time in explaining the argument in detail that हाँ दूसरी साइड ने ये बोला. But problem is उसकी speech already हो चुकी है. Judge already has a note of उसने ये बोला. What you need to do is just make the judge refer to that part of their notes in a couple, and that can be done in one to two lines, that this is the argument that I'm rebutting in short, and then start with your rebuttal. So there's an optimum amount of time that you need to spend in doing this. You can't spend zero time, you can't also spend too much time. So you need to keep that in mind. The fourth thing, respond with your arguments and logic. मतलब वही है that rebuttals, like we discussed earlier, are also not supposed to be one-liners or disses or anything that makes you sound like you're winning the debate. Like you can't say things like this is obviously false. You need to prove why this is obviously false and things like that. So rebuttals को भी arguments की तरह देखना है. You need to prove them with analysis and things like that. Those are also ideas. If the other side brings an idea that says that X will lead to Y, my rebuttal that X will not lead to Y is also an idea, and it also needs analysis, right? So look at those in a similar fashion. The next thing is contrast the impact. What happens a lot of times in debates is that debates get so messy and so mixed up that people just say why like each side is wrong, why the opposing side is wrong, and ये बहस चलती रहती है दोनों sides के बीच में. But what sometimes speakers don't do is tell the judge, अच्छा अगर दूसरी side wrong है, what is the impact of this, why is it better, like given that they are wrong, which side is better now. So you need to contrast the impact. Like if gov has a certain benefit A and you as op have a different benefit B, you need to prove why benefit B is more important than benefit A. या फिर even if you're talking about the same benefit, for example, you're gov and as op, you want to achieve the same goal in a debate for the world, but you're debating which way is the best to debate to like reach that goal. If you're pointing out the other side will not reach that goal, at the same time you also need to prove why your side reaches that goal better. That is what I mean by contrasting the impact. You tell that this is the extent to which gov reaches this goal, this is the extent to which op reaches this goal, and this is why we reach that goal better or more than what the other side does, and things like that. So what is the end impact of the rebuttal that you're making on the lives of people or in the debate, or if even if it's not an impact based argument, uh, if it's a principle argument, then like whether that principle exists or is proven or is important and things like that, you need to also tell the in addition to making the rebuttal, you also need to tell the judge what that rebuttal does for your team in the debate, so that the judge is able to identify ki, हाँ, this is the impact of this rebuttal and therefore your side should win and things like that. The last thing, never try to rebut every example. We already discussed this in previous session, I think. Examples again lie on both sides of like any topic. There are some examples which would favor some side, other examples which would favor other side. Also, like if you are a third speaker, for example, if you're a whip, then by that time a lot of the examples have come up from the other side, right? If you spend a lot of your time rebutting each and every example, you will eat up 4 minutes, for example, of your speech just for examples. And उसमें भी फिर risk ये है that the other side can bring yet another example that makes your मेहनत irrelevant. if in place of that, if you like don't attack the example but attack the analysis or attack the premise or idea of the other side, that is a more damaging thing. That is a spot that you have put the other team in, from where it is more difficult to recover for them. That's a more effective rebuttal than rebutting the examples. ठीक है. Before that, do we have any questions? अब हम motion पे जाएंगे, but just taking a break here. Do we have any questions? You can type in chat or you can unmute. I'll just wait for 30 seconds. How do you know which example to rebut, like which would make the most impact? So primarily the idea is that other things are more important than examples. So as a rule of thumb, prioritize rebutting idea and analysis over examples first. But in case you think about rebutting examples, you have the time, possibly think about which example supports their case best, or the strongest example if there are multiple examples. Or sometimes it happens that the other side's case is tied to an example, yeah, based on an example, hand in hand chal raha hai, and things like that. So in that case, rebutting the example can be a good idea. Or if that is the only way that you can see that the other side can be rebutted and no other way, then that's a case where you can rebut the example. But assuming there are multiple examples, obviously the strongest one needs to be rebutted, because that is the one that's providing the most persuasive power to the other side, and due to that, that is most damaging to your side. So जो सबसे urgent damage है उसको सबसे पहले हटाओ. That's a rule of thumb for rebuttals, in terms of arguments, in terms of examples, anything, or in terms of different pieces of analysis. What is the most convincing piece of analysis from the other side? Rebut that, and you've done the maximum damage to their analysis. So yeah. Um, any other questions? ठीक है, लगता तो नहीं है. हो तो बता देना. Let's move on. Okay, so let's do an interactive exercise. In the previous session, that like in when this session was done 2 years ago, there were 3 motions that were discussed. But we'll discuss one motion for now, uh, in the interest of firstly keeping this session a little shorter, but secondly also, like I said, मेरे को थोड़ा last minute चीज़ हो गई थी, so I could not exactly prepare, but ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं. I think one motion is also enough for like this exercise. So there's a motion, this house would ban gambling. There's a gov case and there are 3 arguments. What I want you to do is think for a minute or two, look at these arguments, understand them, and when like type your rebuttals in the chat. If you're rebutting argument 1, uh, then before your rebuttal type 1 and then whatever your rebuttal is. For example, this. If you're rebutting argument 3, then this, something like this, right? So do that, take 1 or 2 minutes, type in what rebuttal you like, how you would rebut these arguments.
And this is where you have the opportunity to make things interactive. Just try and think what ideas come in your head and then just put them across in the chat. Don't hesitate putting any ideas at all.
Yes, Harshit, you have to rebut the arguments that are on the screen. So this is a gov case. Assume that you're on opposition. How would you rebut these arguments?
If you don't want to type, you can even unmute and like say something. And please don't hesitate. It's not like someone's going to judge you or anything. We're all learning here.
Yes. Okay. Everything is good in limit. Depends on the person's moral character of self-control. Fair. Archie says social virtue isn't always in benefit and well-being of people. Society also considers divorce as negative virtue. Doesn't mean it's very good, Archie. Good, good, good. Gambling could be helpful for people. Gambling could be helpful for people who are in need of money. Okay, the second part is somewhat questionable, but the first part about social virtue, that's a good response. Gaurav, you can unmute.
Yes. Firstly, I would like to say that gambling not only mean in a negative light. We do mutual funds and all those things. That is also a part of gamble. We gamble with our luck. We gamble with the money that we put on it. But it not necessarily makes it socially evil. So we cannot put it on a negative light as a total impact that it creates.
So Gaurav, the issue with this response is that we are not banning the usual way of life, that is playing a gamble in your personal life decisions things. We're just banning the specific activity gambling. So if we say that mutual funds be gambling hai, stock market be gambling hai, that's not completely true, because mutual funds have a decent likelihood of risk. There are experts who are taking care of your money, thinking which stocks to invest in. Or even if you go in the stock market by yourself, it's there is a lot of skill involved in predicting which stock will go up, which stock will go down. You and analyze stocks and things like that. What happens in gambling is that it's chance based, right? It's based on luck. I don't know exactly how gambling works, but there's a lot of risk involved in the specific activity of gambling, which is why
True.
that can't be equated to like other activities. But yeah, good try, I guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Obed, in a free market, every consumer has absolute right to choose their own way of spending their own money. Good, Obed. Good, good, good. It's in their freedom. These rich men pay taxes and offer employment. They also promote tourism. It's seen a popular fun spot. So yeah, Obed, good response for the second argument. Third, notion that gambling promotes is not concrete at all. It is a pure speculation. A particular activity lead to another one's. Second, viewed in a similar category. Fair, Gotham, good response. Archie for third. Banning gambling that was not in family, the house can make rules which would regulate the gambling industry. Fair. You'd also need to analyze how exactly you would regulate the industry, and like what exactly are the areas which you would regulate, why those regulations are likely to control the bad aspects that gambling is promoting, according to this argument at least. And then that rebuttal can make more sense, right? But yeah, that's also on the right line. Anisha says women on the period entering temple touching food was also fair, fair, fair. Yup, yup. So Anisha's response is in line with Archie's response of social virtue, the first part at least. So yeah, that's fair. Gambling will turn is great profit. Okay, same as Archie. Like the good part is also same as Archie, but the slight issue is also same as Archie. So like uh, the idea that gambling is a good thing to come out of poverty, or there's a great benefit to it and things like that, that's I slightly like that's very difficult to prove, and that's like probably not where your rebuttals should go, because chance पे ही based at the end of the day, so you can't definitively prove something. So probably not that, but yeah, the ideas on social evil and things like that, negative virtue, fair ideas. Harshit says gambling involves a lot of maths, logic, and if well played capital allocation, it's a good way to make side income. And I recently made $10 billion tax free game price, so it does boost the economy. Harshit, I'm not sure if a lot of skill is involved in gambling. Uh, but ठीक है, like theoretically, if you can prove that, possibly that's a way of responding to it. Uh, Not sure how persuasive it would be in debate rooms though, but yeah, if you can explain it, then well. Khush says if gambling is not completely banned but regulated. Yeah, same as above. So like regulation is the usual response to banning policies, but also like we need to, like in an actual debate you need to substantiate or analyze what those regulations would look like. Why would they be effective in controlling the problems that Gov is accusing your side of having and things like that. Kanishk says consider something very social evil is dynamic. सही बात है, that's true. वही negative virtue वाला. Okay, so I think the first response का argument you people have got, that social virtue or like social evil, negative virtue, that's a very subjective judgment and things like that. So you can stop rebutting the first argument. Obviously, if you have different ways, then sure. But if you have the same response, you can stop. The second is also rebutted by Obed in a good way, I think, in terms of like their right to choose and spending their own money, things like that. That's a fair response. If you have other responses to that, then go ahead. If you have the same response, then don't type that. Kanishk says social dynamic. ठीक है हाँ. Savya says for 1 and 2 both, gambling is just a mere activity that is perceived as negative just because few people don't know how to do it properly. Go bro. देखते हैं यार, पता नहीं properly, not, I don't have much idea, but as far as I know, it's usually based on luck a lot. Manas says gambling is game of chance, cannot favor. That's true. But then Manas, you're making the argument for Gov side only, because Gov ka idea is that it makes people go broke. You're saying that it cannot favor or Acha, okay, I got it. Okay. So Gov ka idea is that it makes people go broke and only benefits the rich. Your idea is that it doesn't benefit the rich only, it can benefit anyone. It's a game of chance. I think that's what your idea is. That is a fair response. It's somewhat of a mitigatory response in the sense that you're saying that poor को भी benefit कर सकता है because it's a game of chance, but the larger harm still remains that poor को और broke भी करा सकता है. That's the larger harm that still remains with this rebuttal. So it is mitigation for sure. It does somewhat mitigate the impact of the other side, but the major impact still lies. Yatharth says gambling does not only benefit the elite class but also benefits others. Yeah, same as Manas ka rebuttal. Vriddhi. Gambling is not social evil. Individual choice. Person skilled in game can play with limits. Take care. Others, at least some authority decide how they want to spend their money. Many things move on. ठीक है हाँ, similar lines as Obed ka response. Gautam says notion of gambling being mean of looting is flawed. Unregulated industry of various skill, no data can be considered to reach this notion. Possibly yes. Krishna, at the end of the day, it's all about money. That's a better way for the state to collect tax, but fair, yep. ठीक है मतलब हाँ, like if you would ban an activity, then the state doesn't get to collect revenue from that activity. Whereas if you keep it legal, there is a level of state control and you can earn revenue from it. You'll have to also like tell why this is the most important benefit in the debate, in the sense that there are a lot of other sources where the government gets revenue from. Why is this marginal increase in revenue more important than the problems specifically related to gambling that we're talking about? So possibly a little more weighing or impacting on that. Why is this small piece of revenue more important? but हाँ it can serve as a line of rebuttal that हाँ state का revenue बढ़ेगा and things like that. कहाँ थे हम? Anisha says there is no survey or proof that gambling promotes drug use or gun violence. ठीक है हाँ. Kanish says gambling factor of luck and play. ठीक है, same response as I think Manas. हाँ. Obed says online gambling clearly shown that there's a large chunk of people who do it for pure fun and just works as a form of betting or challenges as things between friends. If these activities directly promote gun violence, these wouldn't be banned in casinos. They're just a side cause of many activities that we observe. There's a lot of school shooting that happens. Does schooling create gun violence? Uh, good, good responses, Obed. There are 2 to 3 things that you're saying in this rebuttal. Uh, all of these make sense, I think. Firstly, you target the idea that, like, if you say that many people do it for fun, you target the idea that, uh, like, Gov ka assumption somewhat is that people do gambling for money and people then go broke or it just economically benefits the rich. This somewhat targets the idea that they do it for money. Most of them also do it for fun. But even within that population, poor इंसान भी fun के लिए कर सकता है. Is that also fair, or like that also has some danger? But yeah, this is an interesting way of looking at it, that not all people do gambling for money, they also do it for fun. उसके अलावा casinos वाला thing, that's also fair, and shooting वाला also fair. Others says why not regulate the usage and place restrictions over their usage as they cause more mental and physical harm than gambling. Fair response. बस वही है कि presumably drugs पे regulation and guns पे regulation in status को also exist कर रहा है. It's मतलब it's not a new thing that is being introduced in the rebuttal. But हाँ ठीक है, fair response that जो problems है उनको regulate करो rather than diminishing the platform that is becoming a ground for that problem or things like that. Sanya point two strongly questionable. Rather, the rich would be at high risk of losing, and gambling would be more as compared to the poor. But rich. Fair response, Sanya. You're saying that rich इंसान ज़्यादा पैसा फेंकेगा gambling में, so they can lose more. The issue with this response, it's a fair response, but the reason why it's not the most important response is uh, the other team can say that your response is only talking about the rich people, right? The rich person possibly has lots of money, even if they lose 1 lakh, 2 lakh, or 5 lakh in a particular game of gambling, they still have a lot of money that won't make their survival difficult. But the more important impact in Gov ka claim is that it makes people go broke. Although हाँ, part of it is also addressed in your argument that rich people can also go broke अगर वो पूरा ही पैसा उड़ा दें. I think that was the line where your rebuttal was. So that's fair. But
Can
हाँ,
I also
हाँ,
say something? So I think I agree largely with what Akshat said, but also like even if we talk just about the rich, there's like this concept in economics that we've all probably studied about how 1 rupee of difference matters more to the poor than it does to the rich. So when you compare um like an increase or decrease in their spending or their income, so one like the amount that they're spending on gambling is not going to matter too much to the rich. But हाँ वही बात है कि अगर वो extremes पे करने लग जाएं, then it's something that's like that can probably lead to bankruptcy or insolvency or something like that.
याप मैं भी सेम ही चीज़ सोच रहा था, वो 1 रुपी किसको ज़्यादा मैटर करता है वाला. ट्रू. ठीक है. Okay, I think you people can stop typing now. We have enough rebuttals. Preeti says if we read everything drug abuse and gun violence, any other source fair. Yup. It also needs to be shut because it seems to be a stereotype and things like that. Kind of ignorant. Yeah, Vridhi's response is somewhat related to ऊपर वाला response that said कि drug use or gun violence को regulate करो instead of banning gambling altogether and things like that. But Vridhi also gives examples of other industries where ये सब also होता है. तो ऐसे करके क्या आप सारी इंडस्ट्रीज बंद कर दोगे? नहीं, you'll control that thing, because it might seem reasonable to ban gambling because of the social taboo attached to it, but does it sound reasonable to ban the music industry or the entertainment industry and things like that? So yeah. Himani says, if you look at the larger picture, it is evident that activities like drug use could be real misuse of charity and church donation. Gambling is not the main cause. Illegal activities could arise from other causes. Only the main cause, economic breakdown, from gambling and drug selling. Fair response, I guess. मतलब if you can prove what exactly is the cause of drug use and gun violence, then you can say that उन causes पे work करो and not this other platform of activity. I'm not exactly completely understanding the last part. Himani, can you unmute and explain the also के बाद वाला part in your answer?
Yeah, I was saying when in America, in I guess 2000, when the economy broke down, it was mostly the money collected from drug selling that paid the tax of the government, from gambling that paid for the poor. So it was mainly from that illegal or the activities that should be banned that paid for the country. So I don't think gambling is an activity that should be banned. It could be used as a good way too.
Okay, so the impact of this rebuttal is that it contributes to the GDP, so it contributes to taxation as well, and that's beneficial for people. Is that the idea?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, okay. हाँ ठीक है, fair. So this is basically to some level, Himani's second part is the impacting of ऊपर वाला some rebuttal, which said that state can earn revenue by gambling if gambling is not banned. So to some मतलब और भी impact कर सकते हो, but this is some lines of impacting कि why that state revenue is like important, because someone can question भाई और भी जगह से तो state revenue आता है, but this is a situation where GDP was largely constituted from gambling and things like that. So like although not a regular situation, possibly an exception, but still this is just one way of impacting. There can be other ways of impacting as well. Khush says opening casinos backed by law will somewhat benefit capitalists who own them, but it will also generate huge employment for others who work there. Tourism industry will boom, and the local industry is easy, aiding tourism will also be benefited. So ठीक है, खुश का I think is about the economics wala thing. Gov ka argument is that because it's chance and all, so people go broke. Khush ka argument is that the industry provides employment to people, and uh, economic opportunities open up around in and around casinos and things like that. So that also leads to prosperity. However, it's a fair response that it's not economic bad that gambling brings. It's also some level of economic good. However, the part that this does not cater to is the people who participate in gambling as an activity are still likely to go broke. This puts a different impact in face of that going broke wala impact, and says that listen, people are going broke, that's fine, but people are also earning money through employment and things like that. It's a fair line of response. What's needed in addition is proving why this another impact is more important than people going broke and things like that. Why is the benefit more important than the harm in your word? Ideally मतलब वही है, जो harm वो point out कर रहे हैं उसको ही अगर rebut कर दो किसी तरीके से तो अच्छा है. But हाँ, this is also a fair way of response. ठीक है, so I think we've discussed all rebuttals. Most of you got the rebuttals good, like many rebuttals were good, I think. I hope discussion ठीक लगा होगा. So first का response वही है, I think most people identified it, that social evils बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं. It doesn't mean that you ban all social evils or negative virtues, and also the judgment of negative virtues is something that's subjective, something that's time sensitive. किसी time पे something else was a negative virtue, at a later point in time something else. This majorly relates to a theory of virtue ethics. So like there are three theories of morality. There's utilitarianism, which says that things should be uh, like right and wrong is basically decided by the consequences or things like that. That's a simple way of understanding it. There's deontology, which says that things are right and wrong according to some rules and like regardless of outcomes. And then there's virtue ethics, which says that there is a certain definition or a characterization of what it means to be a good citizen or a good person and things like that. That's where virtue ethics kicks in. So your argument, the most rebuttals that we got for first argument is that virtue ethics is basically not the best way to formulate state policies, because what the state thinks is a virtue or a vice, मतलब virtue is अच्छी चीज, vice is बुरी चीज, what the state thinks is a virtue or a vice should not get into the law or the policy and things like that. So the responses that we got mainly questioned that whether state should make that judgment of virtue or vice and things like that. So that's fine. The second का response is हाँ, basically about personal choice and the principle which supports personal choice. So many of you said personal choice है, even if they go broke, it's their own choice. The reasoning for that choice was somewhat present in, I think, Obed ka answer, which was you're spending your own money and things like that. So that's basically the principle of private property, that your money can be seen as your private property. You have worked hard to earn that money. You have paid the state taxes, and after that, you have received this money in your account that solely belongs to you. How you spend it is totally your choice, regardless of whether that way of spending benefits you or harms you. You can also spend it on fatty foods or like junk food and things like that, which can also be harmful to you. But that's a personal choice that you make solely because of the reason that the money that you have is your private property and you hold the say in which it is being spent and things like that, right? The third के responses भी ठीक थे, I think. Gun violence and drug use, the fact that it's a stereotype that's attached to the industry, the fact that other industries also have drug use or gun violence, do we ban them as well and things like that. Another thing that you could possibly think of is that banning something doesn't completely lead to 100% removal or absence of this activity. This activity might still happen in an underground manner, but the problem happens that if you ban this activity, you as the state don't have any control over the activity. So it goes even outside of regulation than it is in status quo. Versus if you don't ban it but keep it under regulation, or like don't ban it, so it doesn't become an underground thing that's hidden from the state. It comes under the purview of the state, and the state has more ability to regulate drug use, gun violence, and things like that. So that's possibly another way that you can respond to the third argument. Chunk of employment. ठीक है. So I think you people had good rebuttals. जो discussion हुआ वो भी अच्छा था. कोई doubt हो तो पूछ लेना. I hope this was fruitful. Cool. Let's move on to the next slide. So after this discussion, like अब आपने कुछ rebuttals बनाए, तो you might have realized what we meant by attacking the premise or contrasting the impact or things like that. What we meant and how those things played out in an actual rebuttal, है ना? So let's वही है, मतलब good and bad rebuttals essentially जो पहले था उसी का more tips वाला form. So always attack the premise first. Every case is built either on an assumption or a principle. So in these rebuttals also you might have noticed that the rebuttals which attacked the premise sounded more convincing than those which agreed with the premise but disagreed with the other parts of the argument, because those rebuttals broke the fundamental part of the argument. So that obviously brings more convincing power to your case. The second thing, generally avoid attacking examples. ये तो पता ही है, मतलब wastes a lot of time and can divert the debate and all. Third is attacking premises is consistent and can evolve. What do we mean by this? What do we mean by consistent and can evolve? Being consistent means that an idea that comes in a PM speech, and suppose you are opposition, you need all three speakers need to attack that idea, and you need to start attacking that idea as early as possible. If it comes in the PM speech, it needs to be started, like you need to start attacking that from the LO speech itself. ठीक है? So this is what we mean by consistency, that all three like I'm not saying that सबको same चीज बोलनी है attack करते समय. That's what we mean by evolve. You all three speakers attack the same idea, और DPM में कुछ नए ideas आए तो आप DLO से उसको attack करो. But what we mean by evolution of your responses is your LO would probably attack to an idea of the PM by a certain logic. As DLO, you can bring forward a different logic to oppose the PM's idea. So this means you have two ways in which you responded to the premise of an argument, for example, and though both are different and both do hold some level of persuasiveness. So सब लोग सेम चीज तो नहीं बोल सकते. If you're repeating the same rebuttal, then repetitive हो जाएगा. You won't be credited after the first time you say it. Obviously you have to defend those rebuttals, in which case you can refer to them in a short way. वही एक दो लाइन में बोल के कि this is why this rebuttal still stands. वो reasoning आपका new होगा कि why this still stands and things like that. But evolution means you can respond to the same ideas in different ways throughout your speeches. All of those ways would hold some persuasive value. That's what we mean. Also keep in mind that they don't contradict the ऊपर वाला जो भी आपने बोला है. They if like कैसे बताऊँ मैं इसको, हाँ even if के थ्रू बता सकते हैं. So like if PM says something and LO says something else, and अच्छा actually in rebuttals में से एक example ले लेते हैं. थर्ड वाला लेते हैं, ड्रग यूज और गन वायलेंस वाला. सो वन लाइन ऑफ रिस्पॉन्स कैन बी दैट सपोज पीएम ने बोला कि गैम्बलिंग में ड्रग यूज और गन वायलेंस प्रमोट होता है एंड देयरफॉर वी शुड बैन इट. प्रॉब्ली एलओ सेज दैट listen, this is a stereotype that's attached to the gambling industry that's not completely true due to xyz reason or things like that. Suppose DLO says that अरे ड्रग यूज और गन वायलेंस तो म्यूजिक इंडस्ट्री, एंटरटेनमेंट इंडस्ट्री, इन सब में भी होता है, क्या तुम उसको भी बैन करते हो? A gov can possibly say, and even though you didn't intend this, but a gov can possibly say that तुमने फर्स्ट स्पीच में बोला कि ड्रग यूज या गन वायलेंस नहीं होता है, तुमने सेकंड स्पीच में बोला दैट दूसरी इंडस्ट्रीज में भी तो होता है, तो क्या उसको भी बैन करने, विच मीन्स यू अग्री दैट इसमें भी होता है बट स्टिल इट्स नॉट फेयर टू बैन. इन दीज केसेस, to have clarity in your rebuttals, in your different rebuttals जो evolve हो के आए हैं, what you do is you use the word even if. That makes it clear what you want to convey. So you're attacking an argument on multiple levels. The first level is that it is a stereotype that that is attached to gambling, that there's drug use or there's gun violence. The second layer starts with the word even if there is drug use and gun violence, we think that this exists in other industries also. You don't ban other industries, why do you ban gambling? So this even if makes it clear that you're considering two different cases. First case, that drug use or gun violence doesn't exist, it doesn't exist to the same extent at least, या फिर gambling doesn't promote it. The second is even if that is true, this is why we should still not support it. अगर आप ये even if word use नहीं करते हो, sometimes what happens is sometimes you will commit contradictions yourself. What happens is even if you didn't intend to commit a contradiction and आप actually different levels में attack कर रहे थे, the understanding of your rebuttals from the other side turns out to be different. They show that you're being contradictory and ऐसे करके it turns out to be a messy debate. So it's best to use the word even if wherever possible, or like if you have different lines of rebuttal. So if there's an idea, you say response 1, even if you don't buy response 1, response 2. That makes it a lot of that makes it clearer. ठीक है.
Just one small addition. I think Akshat, you can't see the chat now.
अच्छा एक सेकंड.
I've just asked
Oh,
if
हाँ,
I can add. हाँ.
sorry.
No, no, it's okay. Well, I didn't realize the screen share me would be on the other screen. But so like whenever you use these, even if arguments, like this is exactly what I was going to say, how you like frame your rebuttal in that manner. But also you can say things like we're being charitable to the other side, or like, you know, you can say that even if we take them in their best case, that chalo हमने उनकी बात मान भी ली, तो भी we think that even if हम उनकी terms पे चल रहे हैं, even then we're winning, like whatever they've set out in this debate, in terms of that also we're winning. So that goes on to show that you're being cooperative towards the other side also, and it's not like you're not the side that's making the debate messy कि हम तो किसी की बात सुनने ही नहीं वाले और जो हम बोल रहे हैं वही ठीक है. So that goes on to show that like you're like a good, you have to remember that you have to be good debaters, not just in terms of the ability to debate, but also good people while debating. So that goes on to show like a more sort of cooperation in the debate room also, and leads to like healthy debates. So that's also very important.
ट्रू बहुत वेरी ट्रू बिकॉज वही है कि जो मैंने बोला बिकॉज ऐसा नहीं है कि दूसरी साइड की सारी बातें गलत होंगी अ लॉट ऑफ द टाइम्स द अदर साइड विल आल्सो हैव रीजनेबल थिंग्स टू से what your job is to do as a good debater is to realize where the other side is reasonably true and not just oppose this because you're on the opposite side. Identify where they are reasonably true and still find reasons why you should support your side even if what the other side is saying is true to some extent. तो मतलब वही बहुत सही बात है. ओके हाँ ठीक है फोर्थ ऑलवेज कंपेयर आई गेस वही मतलब ये रिबटल्स के डिस्कशन में भी क्लियर हो गया होगा इन सम केसेस आई डिड टेल यू कि इम्पैक्ट कंपेयर करके दिखाओ बिकॉज मुझे क्लियर नहीं हुआ था व्हाट इज द एंड रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट रिबटल. Hello judges to judge your own case in a much more that's true yeah. ठीक है we're over with this slide. Preemptive rebuttals ठीक है. So what do we mean by preemptive rebuttal? Preemptive means कि पहले से ही रिबट कर देना. Rebutting something beforehand or rebutting something before even that argument has been made by the other side. It's usually done in PM speech. The reason why in PM is because if you by the time you come to LO, PM has already made some arguments, so you're rebutting already made arguments that you normally do. So preemptive rebuttals is something that's specific to PM speeches because you're the first person. But that doesn't mean that you have to be restricted to your own case. Yep, preemptives are best. सहज काफी रन करता है. मैं एक एग्जांपल दूंगा सहज का actually. So preemptives are usually a good way because uh, you show you are being engaging with the other side from the start itself. So that again, as Soumya said, gives charitability, shows that you're charitable to the other side, shows that you're willing to uh, take the other side के arguments into consideration and still give reasons as to why your side should win and things like that. So preemptives are good in that way. Just एक second रुकना. I'll just look at an example. सहज CVS क्वार्टर्स या सेमीज वो रिलीजन से रिलेटेड कुछ डिबेट थी ना वो क्या था मोशन.
I think it was semis, right? When जिसमें I think they were saying कि Christian religion में when you go to the
कन्फेशन वाला.
हाँ confession में correct.
हाँ so whether that should be
So allowing
protected.
that as a way of criminal investigation or not, so that you're basically compromising on the religious authority of a person in the pursuit of seeking some investigation.
ठीक है तो उसका एग्जांपल दूंगा मैं इनको बट हाँ. So the second thing is in preemptive rebuttals only do it if you think there's a point that the other team will 100% make and that argument needs to be broken down from the first speech onwards. So what are the two criteria that you need to evaluate to decide whether you rebut something preemptively या फिर जब बाद में आएगा तब rebut करेंगे. The first is if you're sure that the team will 100% make that argument. If you are not 100% sure, then what happens is if the other team doesn't make an argument but you still rebutted it in your PM speech, you gave 1 minute or so to it, what happens is you have wasted a minute or so of your PM speech in something which the other side did not run, while you lost out on opportunity cost because that 1 minute could have possibly been used to present your case better, है ना. So there's this cost benefit analysis that you need to do कि क्या likelihood है that other side will say this thing for sure. अगर sure हो, because there are debates where the trade-off is very clear. Suppose debates about rehabilitation versus retribution in the criminal justice system. जैसे हमने पिछले उसमें डिस्कस किया था कि what should we do with criminals? Should we lock them up in jail and punish them, or should we like rehabilitate them, make them a better person, give them therapy or things like that? So in debates where the trade-off is very clear and you know exactly what the other side is going to argue, it makes sense for you to run preemptive rebuttals right from the start, so that बाद में you're not blindsided or not तुम पे pressure नहीं हो कि अरे ये तो बहुत अच्छी argument लिया है. You start engaging with it from the first speech itself. If you're not sure, then it doesn't make sense, because why? The second thing is that the argument needs to be broken down from the first speech onwards. This is also when like this criteria is also because realistically speaking, अगर आप सोच रहे हो that you need to rebut an idea from the first speech itself, presumably that's an idea that you think that अगर DPM तक wait किया तो बहुत late हो जाएगा, or that you will not have enough time to respond in DPM and GovWeb or things like that. It is an idea that needs substantial amount of response from your side. That is the point where you consider it to rebut in your PM speech. If you think that it's a very major idea of the other side's case and you absolutely need to deal with it from the first speech onwards, otherwise your chances of winning this debate are less. That is also when you think of rebutting something preemptively. The third thing is that preemptives can strike back at your own team, so don't try to do it when it's not necessary. If you think of an idea that the other side did not think of, but you preempt that and तुम्हारा preemptive में ऐसा था, but the other side actually gets that idea from you and develops that idea to a very good argument, you essentially backfired your own team because of that preemptive. So if you have preemptive rebuttals, make sure that the other side will 100% say it. Make sure that it needs to be broken down shuru se hi, and make sure that it's a strong preemptive, not a very flimsy sa response that doesn't have much impact. So for example, CVS जो हमारे पड़ोस का कॉलेज है, उसके टूर्नामेंट में in the quarter final, ये सहज ध्रुव वृंदा were debating on a motion which was so in Christianity you have confessions, you have spaces to make confessions, right? अच्छा semis था, sorry, हाँ semis था. So you have spaces where you as a Christian can make confessions, है ना? And the priest or whoever, I'm not exactly sure, but they talk to you and जो भी है, they make you feel better or things like that according to the religion and things like that. So the motion was that confession box, yeah. So the motion was that confession box की बातें, should they be considered or should they be allowed to be disclosed for criminal investigations or not? So like if someone has confessed to a crime in a confession box, is that should that remain there because of privacy and things like that, or should it be disclosed for criminal investigation and things like that, right? So Sahaj and team were in the Gov side, Sahaj Dhruv Brinda, and Sahaj was the PM. Sahaj, from the first speech itself, identified that the other side will make the argument of privacy or like the freedom to follow your religion and things like that. And from the first speech itself, he started weighing the argument as to why this information getting to the police or things like that, why this is the most important thing and why this impact trumps the other side's argument of like freedom to follow your religion or like your privacy and things like that. So first speech से ही this team हमारे college की, they identified that listen, this is for sure the argument that the opposite side is going to run, and they ran that, right? And Sahaj and Vrinda and Dhruv, these people won the debate and ठीक है, eventually won the finals also, वो अलग बात है. But हाँ, my example was related to that particular debate. Sahaj, if you want to elaborate or like say something on that.
Just one thing. So basically, preemptives are great, and I think, as Akshat said, that they largely make sense if you know for sure that this is something the other side is going to push. And isme we realize that if the idea is that you can go ahead and practice your own religion and that will not be going ahead and be part of any investigation, uska essence yahi hai ki you give them the freedom to practice that. And so we identified that ये main push होगा, and we make our arguments as to not being dependent on this happening. तभी अगर मैं फर्स्ट स्पीच में जाके ये बोल दूं कि we know this is what the other side is going to present, but हमारे impacts of our arguments are going to be regardless of whether this happens or doesn't happen, and we don't think this is as important as the other things we are able to achieve. अगर तुम वो वे कर दो that our things what we say are more important than what they are going to say, then first say their team now is under the pressure कि उनका main push is now already taken care of. Now उनका first speaker जब आएगा will want to go and present this argument, they will have to think twice कि यार ये already cover हो चुका है, so उनका impact is now already gone. Again, but then you'll have to be very careful कि these things come with, like when you do more debates तुम्हें पता चल जाएगा कि this is something which the other side is genuinely going to get या ये उनका push होगा. That's when preemptives make sense. But otherwise, don't focus on them too much because ये एक अच्छा tool है to win debates, but also a tool which can go wrong. So be very careful about preemptives as a whole. You should be absolutely sure before you go ahead and do it. And secondly, just don't spend too much time on preemptives and also get to your own majority case as well. Just a couple of things about preemptive. Just be careful about this. But otherwise, yeah, it's a good tool you can use in debates.
Yeah, so exactly what Sahaj said. Just because you know that तुम preemptive rebuttal कर सकते हो doesn't mean तुमको हर debate में preemptive rebuttal करना है. Use it strategically, use it only when it favors your team. We've won a lot of debates where we didn't use preemptive rebuttals. It's not a necessary component for your case to win the debate. जहाँ आपको लग रहा है कि फायदेमंद होगा वहाँ पे यूज कर लो. सिंपल सी बात है. कूल. एक सेकंड. हाँ जी, ट्रू. The last slide, points of information. Like we discussed in the first session, they're allowed after first minute and before 6th minute of the speech. So when like पहले मिनट में आप नहीं पूछ सकते POI और आखिरी मिनट में नहीं पूछ सकते, उसके बीच में कभी भी पूछ सकते हो. The speaker can choose to reject your POI, but you are allowed to ask them the POI. And we've already discussed that you need to be respectful in asking. You don't have to heckle and things like that. वो सब first session में हम discuss कर चुके हैं ना. The second thing, if the speaker denies your POI, then wait for 30 seconds. Like I said, don't badger them. Don't continuously say POI, POI to distract them. That's not, like Soumya said, being a good debater. Be accommodative and be reasonable with the other team. You can win by being a good person as well. You don't absolutely need to be uh, someone who creates discomfort for the other team. I think that's a good way to put it. You can win by being good people as well. Wait for at least 30 seconds, ideally a minute, but at least 30 seconds is a good thing. Okay. The third thing is always frame or write the question before asking, because there are two reasons for this. First is written in the bracket, the time limit is 15 seconds. So तुम्हारे दिमाग में एक POI बन रहा होगा, but if you don't write it or if you don't frame it carefully and you say it only when the speaker accepts your POI, because आपने अच्छे से सोचा नहीं है उस question के बारे में that what exactly will you ask, you will blabber about the question, you will cross your time limit. It's possible that तुम question complete नहीं कर पाओगे and you won't be able to get to the crux of the question that damages the other team and तुमको जो पूछना था, and the speaker will already shut you down that listen, you've eaten up 15 seconds of my time, I can't give you more, so I'll just continue with my speech. उसको जितना समझ आया होगा they'll rebut to that, possibly सही समझ गए होंगे, possibly गलत, but जो भी है, this is why you need to write the question and frame it beforehand, or like at least have a very careful framing of it in your mind कि is this going more than 15 seconds? If yes, I need to shorten it. The second reason is that जब आप दिमाग में POS सोचते हो या जब आप when you listen to other team speeches, आपको हर चीज पे कुछ ना कुछ क्वेश्चन लगता है कि अच्छा इस पे I can ask this, इस पे I can ask that. बहुत लगता है. Like I said, we don't exactly give the other team's case the weight that it deserves, and we think everything is by default unreasonable or things like that. But when you actually write the POI and frame the POI is when you sometimes realize that your POI doesn't make sense, or your POI is not exactly the most important thing for which you would waste this opportunity, or that it probably backfires your own team and things like that. So only when you write and frame the POI properly and things like that is when you sometimes realize the true impact of what the impact of you asking this question would be, both on the other team and on your team. Because a lot of the times people ask, like people use the other team's POIs against that team as well. So you need to think of impact on both. And for that writing becomes important because it becomes clear to, like, दिमाग में बहुत अच्छा sound कर रहा होता है, but sometimes it's not exactly logical, so it's better to write. So I think we have come to the end of the presentation. In case anyone else wants to add anything, Soumya, Sahaj, और कोई भी अगर meet में हो, you can questions पूछ सकते हो. I'm stopping the screen share. Sahaj, recording बंद कर दूँ क्या?
हाँ जी कर दो.
Okay.